Hi, my name is Emily Steen. I'm a senior at UMass studying food science and public policy. My talk today is about the power of you at UMass. Growing up, I was the youngest of four siblings and the only girl. When my brothers would upset me, I would cry and throw a fit. Though my distress was evident, this childish form of communication would be met with laughter and mockery, which led to an even bigger display of anger as the frustration just spewed out. My brothers left for college, but when they returned, they were astonished. I'd spent this time in their absence studying fictional characters and those in the world around me as they dealt with disagreements and confrontation. I noted the composure of my mother as she settled the confusion of coworkers. I saw the elegance of Nina Simone as she sat at the piano and disemboweled oppression, and I worshipped the endurance of Black female characters in movies as they combat racism and sexism while preserving joy. When my brothers returned, they expected the same sister they had left, but when their torment was met with tenacious silence, followed by graceful tact in my response and exit, they were left reeling in confusion. This past summer, when faced with the police murder of George Floyd, instead of falling apart, something inside of me switched on. It was the same tenacious resistance to torment that I had learned when I was younger. Though murder by police is all too familiar to the Black community, this collective pause in the face of the pandemic yielded an unparalleled amount of support. After a lifetime of watching systemic chaos sprint across television screens, this time, this moment felt like the world had paused for us and welcomed us, the next generation of change makers, into the ring. I joined the masses in mobilizing, first with other university campaigns, then shifting focus to UMass Amherst. UMass is no different than the rest of the nation in its compliance with systems of oppression, but with determined students and a few progressive administrators, the opportunity for change presented itself proudly. Anyone can answer this call to action, especially you. You don't need to have a PhD in social justice, nor understand the intricacies of organizing, or even have all the answers. All you need to become engaged is to realize the power of your presence, the value of your experiences, and the strength of your voice. Anti-racism is a directive that calls people in. It aligns us in priority and allows us to produce more sustainable and equitable systems. Everybody has the opportunity to incorporate anti-racism in all aspects of life, big and small. I researched the rich history of student activism at UMass and realized that we walked in the path of giants. I was able to advance the needs of current students by picking up where past students had left off. This coalition, consisting of undergraduates, grad students, and staff members, sought insight from our community and submitted demands to the university's upper-level administration. Though we worked for months before submitting our demands, we have continued working with the administration to help encapsulate racial equity into the university's policies. Justice is not achievable overnight or even within a year. This is important to understand, but it shouldn't be a deterrent. In a world that can imagine flying cars and toys that talk, it is not unreasonable to imagine better systems for society. Maintaining patience and engagement leads to small changes with significant impact. Every day you have the opportunity to better society by countering norms that perpetuate injustice. I was frequently overwhelmed with the amount of work that the RJC took on, but when it seemed impossible to change a system that was built against me, I was comforted by one fact. In March of 2020, we watched the entire world change gears and rework systems in every facet of life to adjust for the COVID-19 pandemic. In other words, the world as we knew it flipped quickly. I continue to work with the UMass community to build stronger, equitable systems that ensure the success and well-being of all community members. I encourage you to acknowledge your role and your potential to contribute to our community. The RJC is a coalition because we are stronger together. UMass is a community because we are stronger with you. Thank you.
Picture this. You go to work, the bathroom stalls, suddenly void of toilet paper. Stranded, you ask for help, but someone whispers to you, "No, sweetheart, you need to be bringing that in." It is now your responsibility to bring this basic hygiene product to work or school every day. And to make things worse, no one can know you are doing this. I mean, quite frankly, it's inappropriate. No one wants to know that you use toilet paper in the bathroom. And make sure you wear long sleeves so you can smuggle that toilet paper up your sleeve when you leave the room. And make sure to keep that toilet paper in your bag hidden. And of course, no complaining about this new inconvenience. Now, recognize that this is the life of people who menstruate from middle school, even elementary school, for the majority of their adult lives. Bathroom stalls are void of liners, pads, and tampons. And to make things worse, it's some kind of big secret that we all use these products every day. We hide tampons up our sleeves and stuff pads inside of our shoes. And the word period is such a dirty word that no one dares talk about this everyday obstacle. So as you can see here, this toilet paper and this tampon are shaped a little differently, but both this toilet paper and this tampon are very much the same. Both are soft, white, essential, personal hygiene items, and yet toilet paper is provided in bathroom stalls, and tampons are not. I first realized the magnitude of this problem my junior year of high school. While doing research for an argumentative essay, I learned that girls in the United States and around the world miss entire days of school because they cannot afford pads and tampons. I myself have experienced irregular periods since middle school, and have frequently felt the red-hot, panicked embarrassment of being caught in a bathroom stall with blood-stained underwear and no tampon. It occurred to me that male students never have to worry about this while focusing on their education. Impassioned by this injustice, I wrote my paper arguing that pads and tampons must be provided in bathrooms at no cost to students. Not to brag or anything, but I got an A on that paper, and my teacher encouraged me to take my fight beyond the classroom. I reached out to State Representative Jeffrey Roy and told him about my idea. Like many cisgender men, he had no prior knowledge of this problem, but he took interest and told me to send him a letter. Shortly thereafter, I received a call from his office, and it was time to get to work. First, I wrote a fact sheet to deliver to other state representatives and senators to inform them about the bill and why it matters. Then, I sat across from Representative Roy in his office and wrote my first bill. Pretty exciting, right? And a few months later, I drove an hour into Boston and testified before the entire Education Committee. I waited my turn in a hot room packed full of staffers and cameras and fellow activists. Suddenly, my name was called, and as confidently as I could manage, I made my way to the front of the crowd. I sat down, and when I looked up, I could see that I was just a few feet away from the mostly male panel who would be deciding the fate of menstruating bodies. No pressure or anything. Then, for 3 minutes, I told them all about periods and tampons and vaginas, and I made it clear that tampons are no less important than toilet paper. I told the panel to adjust their priorities accordingly. To my excitement, the committee voted in my favor, and my bill continued moving along in the process. I was interviewed by NBC Boston and the State House News Service, and featured in the Boston Globe and other news outlets. My high school even voluntarily agreed to putting pads and tampons in bathrooms at no cost to students. I felt like I was speaking, and people were actually listening. I was making a difference. I wrote this speech to testify from my own experiences that your ideas matter. The change you want to see is possible, but nothing will ever move without someone like you to make the first push. If you care deeply about what you want to change, you must act boldly. You are not too young or too quiet or too inexperienced. You are more powerful than you think. So find what drives you and don't ever shut up about it. That being said, a couple of months ago, I was told that my bill died before ever reaching the House floor. I read that news slowly, line by line, and it was crushing. It was painful that after all of these years of hard work, it felt like I had failed. I thought back to 13-year-old me, trapped in that middle school bathroom stall with bloodstained underwear and no tampon. And I thought to the woman who told me, "No, sweetheart, you need to be bringing that in." That is my second message, that yes, your voice is powerful and change is possible, but progress is not linear. As you push forwards towards change, there will certainly be setbacks, but it is part of your power to find the value in your shortcomings. And there is always a reason to try, and never a reason to stop pushing. Thankfully, that setback was only temporary, and my bill has just been reintroduced in this House session. The poster you see behind me now is my reintroduced bill, HD 610. I also know that on a larger scale, I will devote the rest of my career towards public health and social equality. But enough about me. What have you experienced that seems unfair? And what kind of change would make it better? What member of your community or government can you reach out to make that change? Whether it's toilet paper or tampons or anything in between, someone has to raise their voice first. And why shouldn't that be you? Thank you.
Now, I want you to close your eyes and imagine of a time where you're so desperate, your hopes keep disappearing one by one. What would you do? Some people might think of such moments right away because they have experienced it before. For many, it would be more difficult. Well then, why don't you take my story then? My story was filled with despair. My hopes kept on disappearing until I was left with absolutely nothing behind. But I overcame it, and I'm telling the story to you now because maybe if you follow along, and at the end of the story you will know what you can do and what you should do when you're in a similar situation. The story begins on March 25th, 2020. Does strike a match, doesn't it? It was when COVID hit the United States, and especially the New York State the hardest. And I was an exchange student there. An exchange student means that you go abroad for 1 year, studying at a local school, staying with a host family, and you return to your home country. And when COVID came, everything was chaotic. Schools were shut down, students were sent home, and as exchange students, we were advised to go back to our home country. But they let us stay, and I wanted to stay. I was in the middle of my schoolwork. I had colleges that I had to apply to, and going home meant that I had to abandon everything. So I chose to stay. Little did I know that that was the biggest mistake that I had ever made so far in my life. But I did not know either that that mistake would lead me into the most memorable roller coaster ride that I ever had. 1 week later, I sensed that nothing was getting better, so I booked my flight right away. And on the day of my departure, my government, the Vietnamese government, shut down the international borders. So, no flights could come in. My phone started to ringing non-stop, like, "Van, don't go to the airport, stay there. They shut the borders, you cannot go home, stay there for your own safety." And to all I answered, "Hey, they haven't canceled my flight, and I lose nothing if I go there. So I'll just go there, and if nothing works, I'll just stay. So don't worry. The last one was for me though. I was worried, but I swallowed the fear and headed to the airport. And sure enough, it did not allow me to check in. Phone calls kept coming again. Van, you did your best. It didn't work. So please return to your host family. You're safer there. Well, pretty sure I'm not. No offense, but when you're in a foreign country and a pandemic hit, you would want to go home, wouldn't you? Going home to my host family then was my last resort. And since it was my last resort, I did everything I can to avoid it. I ended up going to the American airline receptionist, asked if they could help. And surprisingly enough, they got me another ticket. The flight would transit in San Francisco to Hong Kong and finally back to Vietnam, my home country. I was super intense asking them if this was going to work, and they assured me that all the flights were confirmed. So I hopped on a plane, and 5 hours later I was nodding off at the waiting gate in San Francisco airport. My mind was a total mess, but the thought of being closer to home gave me the assurance I needed. Suddenly, a flight attendant came and told me that the Hong Kong government just banned all international passports. So, I couldn't depart. I was dumbfounded. The fear of being alone in a strange place sent a shiver down my spine, and I froze in place. However, it turned out that there was also a group of Vietnamese students who were also trapped in the airport. So we got together, arranged a shared house, and did everything we can to arrange another flight to go home. It was futile. My parents, sensing the danger of letting their daughter stay with a large group in a strange place, quickly arranged me to a home of acquaintances of theirs, and I stayed there for a month and a half. A month and a half just to get home. Could you believe it? I could not, even until now. Strange enough, through all my time there staying with the host family, I was doing fine. Talking, joking, exercising, eating with them. Yet, I felt empty. It was like a part of my mind was trying so hard to push the impending fear so far down because it knew if the fear got to my conscience, I would break down. The fear of being alone in a strange place, being with all strangers, not being able to be with my parents, and trillion other things kept being pushed down by this thing called hope. And it was hope that kept me going for so long. And at the end of that month, that fatigued hope got lit up by the news from the Vietnamese embassy about the first flight ever from Vietnam straight to the US with no transiting in between, just to pick us up. I was overwhelmed with joy. I told my parents, I told my host family, and I was preparing for the departure for the whole week. And at the end of that week, the devastating news came. The licensor turned the flight down, so the plane could not land in the US. And at that very moment, my hopes shattered. It was like fate was taking its cold, ruthless hands and squeezed my hopes into a million pieces. And I cried. For the first time that whole period, 3 a.m. in the morning, I wept like a child. It was like I was trying so hard to push all the frustration in that whole period out, and my mind was all blank. My logic, however, remained intact, and like what it had been doing for the past month and a half, it picked me up and pushed me through the days without any complaints. And sure enough, it even picked up my shattered hope and rearranged them in this indifferent yet reassuring kind of way. It said, hey, you're going home one way or another. There's nothing troubles you now, and you don't have to do anything. So, why bother? Cold, I agree, but it was right. There were million sentimental thoughts awaiting to burst out my chest. I struggled so much, and I was all alone, and there's no one understands me. But I was so mentally fatigued. I ignored them and let my logic take charge instead. A few weeks later, the license was finally approved, and everything after that was blurry. I bid goodbye to the host family, I got on the plane, and 24 hours later, I was back in Vietnam. I was not happy for that whole period, though. I did not dare to. My hopes had been crushed so many times before that I was afraid that it would be crushed again if I brought it forward. Not until that I got off the plane and that hot, humid Vietnamese air wafted into my face did I know I was home. And now I'm in the US again, telling you my story. It is your choice to decide what to take away from this story. But for me, it was the hope that I nurtured for the flights, for the people, but most importantly, for myself. I kept the faith within me, faith that I would be myself, the faith that I would push forward no matter what, the faith that I will eventually be home. Knowing that I have a home to look back to, and knowing that however unbelievable a situation might be, I will still be me, and I will still keep trying, is what keeps me going. So, will you keep going?
My family adopted my dog when I was 8 years old. He was a rambunctious puppy, to say the least. And so we fittingly named him Action. Action quickly became my brother, my best friend, and truly the joy of the family. Unfortunately, as Action got older, as all dogs eventually do, he started to experience a lot of health conditions. He got hypertension, diabetes, Cushing's disease, and even a tumor on his leg. But what amazed me early on was despite all of the pain he felt, he still had this joie de vivre, or this downright joyous energy that made him treat every day as if it were a celebration. Unfortunately, when I first experienced illness in college, I didn't have the same resilience that Action had. It took me time to find my joie de vivre. But when I finally did, I realized that the process of doing so had left me with some of the most important lessons that I would ever learn. And it had also allowed me to discover my passions and achieve my most fulfilling accomplishments. This is my story. I arrived at UMass in 2017 as an excited and eager freshman. I was so ready to start this new chapter in my life at college and explore myself personally and academically. And the first few days were just that. I was doing all of those fun things that I saw on TV as describing what a college experience should be. However, of just a few days into my arrival, I started experiencing a slew of mysterious symptoms. I had constant chest pain, stomach pain, and I was always feeling nauseous and dizzy, and I started just having all of these weird symptoms that I had never really experienced all at once before. I thought, okay, maybe the dining hall food didn't settle with me. Maybe I'm just have a mild case of the stomach flu or something. I thought the symptoms would go away. However, days turned into weeks, and these symptoms were still there. I was so confused, and also I was in so much pain. After a few months, a doctor finally diagnosed me with eosinophilic esophagitis, which is a chronic immune disease in which your white blood cells build up and damage your esophagus. I was elated, actually, to finally have an answer of what was wrong with me and what was making me feel so sick all the time. And finally, I could start a new diet and medications that would actually work and help me feel better. But as diet and medication eased my symptoms and I started to feel better, I realized that the social and emotional isolation was so intense. This illness had left me completely alone and completely broken in many ways. I didn't really know what to do or what to turn to. And as I watched everyone around me who seemed healthy in my eyes live their life and do all of the things that I had missed out on, I started to engage in a pattern of thinking that I now believe is one of the most dangerous patterns of thinking. I started to pity myself. I started to feel bad for everything I had gone through and really just be upset with my own situation. It was a dangerous trap. It was actually 2 conversations that I had that really helped me get out of this very dangerous pattern of feeling bad for myself. The first conversation was with a friend when we were eating lunch together. I noticed when we were eating lunch that she made the same scrunched up face that I used to make when I was sick. So I started to ask her some more questions. I asked her how she was doing, how she was feeling, if she was okay, and she revealed to me that she was experiencing symptoms that were very similar to my own just a few months ago. She also told me that she was in between insurances, so she couldn't afford the doctor's appointments and ER appointments or any sort of care at the moment. At that time, I shared with her my story just to show my support, my empathy, and my solidarity with her. And I also, as I was saying the story, I also thought of how lucky I was to have the insurance and to have the resources and the family support to be able to go and get care that I needed. So throughout the next few months, I continually checked in with this friend, and I helped her get the care that she needed in order to feel better. This process just highlighted to me that it's so easy to fixate on what we don't have, but there's a lot out there that we still need to look at in more detail. And in this case, I needed to, I guess, get a privilege check and stop feeling so bad about myself. The second conversation that really helped to change my patterns of thinking was with a close friend of mine. She was working as an EMT in a nearby community. And with her over dinner, I was sharing my own experience with illness as well as the experience of helping someone else and in the process checking my own privilege. As we talked about healthcare access and health inequities, she shared with me her experiences as an EMT. She was seeing so many people in this community have these health inequities and face them and face lack of access to healthcare, which had in turn led to an explosion in the amount of chronic disease that they were dealing with. As we talked, this 1-hour dinner turned into a 4-hour conversation. And she really helped me understand that I could either look at my story and feel bad about myself, or I could use my story to change my mindset and to develop empathy to connect with others, and to actually make a change in my community. I chose the latter, and I never looked back. My friend and I decided to tackle the healthcare inequities and barriers to healthcare access that we were talking about at the dinner table. And so we spent our days and nights researching the community that she worked in and researching the healthcare and health landscape of that community. We started to get very involved with the community and volunteered and talked to residents and community organizers, as well as researchers who were studying the area, as well as healthcare workers and teachers. Through listening to people's stories and doing our own research, we were able to develop a workshop that talked about the local health inequities and disparities, as well as potential solutions to them. The workshop also talked about why health disparities exist and how we can improve access to future health predictors like nutrition. As we facilitated this workshop in the community, I realized that I had found my passion project, and I had also learned about what I really wanted to do in my life and the impact that I wanted to make. We also expanded upon this project over time. We got more involved with advocacy work, as well as representing the community on local decision-making committees, and trying to find ways to not only provide better access to future health predictors, but also initiating change on policy levels. With time, we decided to launch our project as a nonprofit organization, and it is now called MEAL Inc., which stands for My Education, Action, and Lifestyle. Through the process of developing this nonprofit organization and expanding upon our projects and our commitment with the community as well as community organizations, I have really learned what my passion is and what my purpose is. And this whole process of being sick and sharing my story and listening to other people's stories, as well as using my story as a way to learn some lessons and do something for my own community, has helped me find my joie de vivre. I am sharing my story with you all today because I truly believe that you all can also find your joie de vivre. Our tough times do not have to define us and do not have to make us pity ourselves. We made it through those tough experiences, and those tough experiences have shown us how resilient and how strong we are. I truly believe by acknowledging this and by listening to those around us, we can find that our own life can be full of passion. And therefore, I encourage you all to also find your joie de vivre and believe in your own resilience. Thank you.